I'll do a very brief introduction, and then we'll get started because we know everyone is kind of anxious to hear what we're going to talk about today. I am Leslie McIntyre-Tavella. I'm the president and CEO of Culpeo HR, and this is my colleague Diana Derivan. We've been together for a long time. We worked at a different company many years ago and worked together for about 25 years. Diana was my VP, my corporate HR VP and human resources. And I was the owner of that company. We were a staffing and corporate services firm. So my background is quite a bit in staffing. Diana is all HR. She's worked for small businesses and large global firms as well. And Culpeo was launched right in the beginning of this pandemic and has been helping many local area companies with their HR compliance challenges, which have been quite many. So that's kind of us. And again, we're going to leave a lot of time at the end so we can really have dialogue with each of you and hopefully help you with what's going on. And I just want to take this off my screen. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay. So as we know, laws are changing and being modified literally daily. We're really encouraging everyone to stay on top of these new local laws, watch the news, read whatever you can that might pertain to you. But our focus today really is going to stay on Connecticut and the Connecticut mandates. If you have locations outside of Connecticut, please remember to refer to those states and those municipal laws, as they will likely differ from Connecticut, and those employees have to follow those federal and state laws. Again, we have a lot of information that we're going to talk about. We also have a newsletter that we'll put in the chat for you that can offer updates. We're getting updates, again, daily with all that's going on now. And so we can get those to you if that helps you in any way. But the biggest thing about this is a lot of what is happening really depends specifically on your business, whether you're a small firm, whether you have a remote workforce, what industry you operate in. It's very difficult to make specific assessments without knowing how your business is set up and how you operate. And I know there's so many business owners out there that have so many questions. I look back when I had my prior company, we had over 50 employees. What would we be doing and how, what a challenge this would be every day for us. So it's right now it's a moving target, and we know that we're just here to provide you with as much information as we can and make sure that your companies remain compliant and safe. So we're going to leave a lot of time at the end of the presentation to talk about, again, your businesses, and you can ask specific questions, and hopefully we can answer them for you, or we will certainly find out those answers. So as we know, September 9th, 2021, Biden mandated the COVID vaccines for the private sectors with businesses with 100 employees or more. They must get fully vaccinated or produce a negative COVID test result weekly before going to work. There's still a lot of questions around this. Who pays for testing? What qualifies 100 workers? We were just talking about that a moment ago. What if you have 100 workers in Connecticut or 98 workers, but you have other locations? There is a lot that is still unanswered that we're all waiting to really, kind of find out what the answers are to these things. A date has not yet been established for workers to comply with this new requirement. And OSHA has been tasked with developing the rules under the ETS, the Emergency Temporary Standard. The problem with this is it's going to take weeks for us to really find out true concrete answers. Employers will be required to provide paid time off for workers to get vaccinated, and potentially paid time off if they suffer from side effects. Federal employees and contractors have until December 8th, 2021 to show proof of COVID-19 vaccination unless they are legally exempt. The testing option has been removed.
So as you can see, it's a very fluid here as far as a lot of questions and answers. I think one of the things that a lot of private employers are waiting to find out is not just who pays for the vaccination, but who's going to pay for that potential weekly testing if in fact you end up having employees that for a variety of exemptions, the two big ones, medical and religion, cannot get vaccinated. So, again, big question for a lot of employers, big concern. How are we going to do this? Who's going to handle the weekly testing? Again, do I even qualify, or will I be told I'm going to qualify as a private business with 100 employees? Because what if I have a lot of temp workers? Are temp workers included in that number? What if I'm close to that number and it's fluctuated a lot? Do I get to choose a payroll date to say this is how many employees I have? Is there going to be some look back method? There's just so many concerns regarding just this 6-prong mandate here. Of course, the other prongs with this mandate did include, large venues and sports arenas. They have to ask for proof of vaccination or a current negative test for people going into those arenas. So, again, this was, quite the announcement. And the only thing we can say is, keep your eye on everything, watch the news. There have been 24 state attorney generals who have protested this right now to date. There may be more, but I think the 24 banded together pretty quickly to say we don't think that private business should be included in this. So who knows what will happen with that. But again, there seems to be a general feeling that this mandate covering federal employees and contractors, will have legs. And interesting to me was that for the federal employees and contractors, they included employees working remotely. So it is not just working at on-site locations. And so again, that raises a lot of bells and alarms for private businesses to say, oh, wait, are we going to fall under that? Which is, are we going to have to mandate vaccines for even our remote workers? So again, since it was a directive for the federal employees, we're going to have to wait and see if there's any guidance from OSHA on remote workers. So stay tuned for all of that.
Yeah. So as we know, yesterday was a big day in Connecticut. If anyone got a chance to watch Governor Lamont, he was on and he was chatting about how it was the first vaccine dose due for healthcare workers. And basically, if you listen to him, they definitely are pushing Connecticut specifically for everyone to get their vaccination. And of course, what they're doing, as we've been talking about, is they really want the help of the private sector. They want the businesses to really support this. They want everyone to get that vaccination. So it'll be interesting today. Today is a big day for New York. We're waiting to see what's exactly going to happen. We know that it's a really hot topic, and a lot of people are very frustrated and upset. And we have a lot of healthcare workers in New York. If they don't get vaccinated, they're going to face losing their jobs. So it's a really, really difficult time, an unprecedented time that we've never really seen before. So we are watching, as everyone else is, and waiting to see what will happen. Governor Lamont's executive order requires businesses below, as we know, to receive the first dose by September 27th. That was yesterday. And the order applies to, as we know, healthcare facilities, nursing home, intermediate care facilities for individuals, managed residential communities, state hospitals. I won't read them all, but basically we know we're really looking at a large amount of the healthcare sector. This is, again, just going to be a really interesting time to see where we finally land on this whole topic and in each state. So stay tuned.
Right. And again, for the weekly COVID testing, for those who claimed exemptions, his quote yesterday was, that will be paid for, at least for the near term,
Correct.
which I thought was a very interesting comment, because it led you to think that it might not continue when you said something, when he said something like that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
The near
in
term?
the near term.
But right now he has state funding, for example, for those who claimed exemptions and will go under the weekly testing. So it was I thought it was very interesting that he said that again, kind of a footnote to what's going to happen in the private sector, because again, you feel like coming down the pike would be very similar, mandates for private sectors. So,
yeah. And we will make this slide deck available, Nancy. So if anyone wants it, we'll make sure that we get that to you. And again, we'll put our newsletter information. If anyone wants to sign up, we'll put it in the chat.
all right. So preparing for mandatory vaccination policies. Again, if fair warning, if you have 100 employees or around there, give or take, whether we're including temp workers, the real directive right now is to start preparing now, communicating, developing a plan. The EEOC has stated that employers with accommodation exceptions can require vaccination as a condition of employment. So again, whether your business is going to fall under a vaccine mandate, or even if you're not required with this with Biden's mandate, again, you can write a vaccine policy for your company, and you just need to consider the impact on this, the kind of workers you have, the kind of business you have. Do you have remote workers? And again, the directive with OSHA is to provide a safe environment for your employees. So that is, the overriding directive from OSHA that everyone needs to keep in mind. Most important is to manage compliance with this. Questions coming in about, can I ask for vaccine, cards or records? Yes, it's not a HIPAA violation. However, you do have to make sure that you're keeping this record, safe and secure, and you have, a plan for all of that. So again, writing something that is transparent, that is compliant, that is probably where most employers should be spending their time right now, and communicating. I mean, your employees, your employee base. I'm sure you've gotten feedback from employees on this topic, and again, it's important to get a pulse on how your employees feel as well. So just a brief on the ADA exemptions. Again, the vaccine mandate, again, if you are going to have a vaccine mandate, you must have accommodation exceptions for medical and religious reasons. The ADA covers the medical exemption. And if someone comes into your office and says, hey, I can't get vaccinated, I have medical issues and I can't get vaccinated. This is no different than any other medical accommodation request. You hand them the ADA paperwork, you don't make a decision, you say, thank you for letting me know, here you go. Please take this to your medical provider and have them fill out the paperwork. Again, nothing different regarding this type of request for a medical exemption than any other medical exemption request. So it's always a good thing to give them a time limit to return the paperwork. And again, the doctor or physician will make the call. If that physician says, correct, this employee cannot receive a vaccine, then you begin the interactive process. You talk about reasonable solutions and accommodations. And again, those could be the remote work option, weekly testing option, whatever you need to do. But again, don't freeze up if somebody says, I can't do this for medical reasons. It's the same thing as if somebody came into your office with any other medical request. So just a quick tip there. Some trends we've seen for companies, and again, everything keeps changing. This might be out of date already. That Microsoft keeps pushing their return to the office date. But I guess what we're really seeing overall is that most large companies, obviously, they know they have more than 100 employees. They're giving their employees time. Nobody wants to have anything sprung on them. HR is working in overdrive. They have to process all of these accommodation requests if they're getting those. So again, they needed the extra time. And so a lot of companies have delayed any office reopenings. These actually seem rather early to me. I love to poll my family and friends, as I'm sure all of you do. And a lot of friends that I speak to have been given at least till the end of the year for any return to work, if they have been working remote. So again, as far as a trend, I always feel that small businesses in particular, I always like to look at what large businesses were doing. Like, I don't want to be the first to make a call. I want to see what other companies are doing in the US and how they're handling things.
Mhm.
So I keep my eye on the news all the time. And I love to see, what these larger and very public companies are doing with their employees, because again, they are trendsetters, if you will. And I think it's really important to, keep an eye on all of these. So again, it's fluid. These dates might have already changed by today. Who knows? Again, as far as businesses preparing, be prepared for workplace morale issues. Do people want to come back? Are you going to actually ask them, or do you have the ability to keep everyone remote? Those strong opinion employees, and make sure that you give them an opportunity to listen and have a voice, if you will. Action steps. I do believe that having a policy ready is vital. Again, the directives might change. We're waiting to hear from OSHA, but again, just make sure that your policy, whatever it is, whether you're encouraging or mandating, you do have those potential medical and religious accommodation exemptions. Believe it or not, you must determine if you're potentially a federal contractor or subcontractor. We've actually talked to businesses where, if they're supplying to other companies, they have to make sure that those companies aren't somehow related to the federal government, and that falls back to them as a subcontractor. And then, of course, the real another big question that we already went over, to determine if you're actually over 100 employees, and if so, really jump on things now. If you have people coming back to the office, of course, in public settings, masking, cleaning, social distance requirements continue. We're based in Lower Fairfield County, where it seemed like for about a minute we had no mask mandate, and then I think it was by August 9, most of the towns here, Fairfield, Westport, Stamford, Norwalk, all put mask mandates in public places back for those towns. So again, you do have to stay very on top of your actual towns and where your business locations are, because, again, we're paying attention to the federal mandates, but don't forget what your town is saying you have to do as well, and where your businesses are located. So just really important.
And Diana, to that point, when we say communicate and stay in front of your employees, what is really important is to make sure that you have some sort of a strategy or plan before you do that. One of our clients, when this really kind of started and became, a big topic of conversation, decided he would go to his employees and ask them, do you want to return to work? And so he sent out a survey. They were all working remote, of course, and 97% of them said no, of which he was not prepared for that answer. And now you are forced almost into a decision. whereby if you don't do as your employees would like, you're really going to hurt your morale. And what you don't want to do now at a time when things are already so stressful and so upsetting and so difficult as a business owner or a leader or manager is you don't want to have your employees leaving. So really having the proper conversations and really taking the time to work with, even if you're a solopreneur, then really make sure you really think about it and get some good contacts that you have, mentors that you can work with to make sure that you really come up with the right answers and a solution before you talk to your people. But definitely do stay connected to your people. It's very, very important to do that. Stay in front of this.
Sure. I mean, as we've seen in the news as well, the great resignation is alive and well. People are saying enough, if they have a strong opinion about, coming back to work and they're going to be asked to do so. Again, you have to know your employees and keep your pulse on that as well. The other issue in preparing and action steps is, again, do you have a lot of hourly workers? So the Fair Labor Standards Act requires that, you pay hourly workers for time testing. So if in fact, you're going to have people with accommodation needs, and they're hourly workers, how are you going to handle them needing to submit weekly testing if in fact you have a vaccine mandate? And if, again, that's another consideration. Some employers don't have the capacity to track or collect weekly test results. I mean, that's just going to be a giant problem for them. So, again, if you think you're going to have a lot of, requests for accommodations, take note of that, because again, once you mandate the vaccine, you're going to have to give those accommodation exceptions. And how, do you have the bandwidth to handle that? And how many people do you think you're really talking about here? So again, just all things to consider. Again, we're waiting for more guidance, more rules on all of that. But, all of these other HR issues come into play with this problem. So, all right. So we threw a couple of Q&As up just to get the ball rolling. Some things that we've actually, been asked. We had one client ask, can we decide to mandate vaccines in some positions and not in others? And actually the answer is yes. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it, because you're adding to a little bit of work for yourself. Most companies, I believe, are saying, my workforce will get vaccinated. Again, this is only obviously applicable to companies that don't fall under the federal mandate with 100 or more employees. But if you had a small business and you wanted to make some distinction, you would not be breaking any law, as long as you don't base your decision on protected classes and you make a business related decision. So that is okay. Another one, we had a company ask, they have a vaccine policy for their on-site workers. They're submitting cards to HR, but they had a blurry card and a misplaced card and somebody saying they couldn't get a card, et cetera. So again, you can require, as the EOC said, vaccines as a policy. However, you can require they submit proof. And if you can't see the proof, you can ask your employee to get a replacement card. They are easily obtainable. They have to remember where they got their original vaccine, of course. But the reason this question is important really is that just make sure you're not requesting more information than is what is on a vaccine card. It's a yes or a no. Don't want to get any additional medical information, but a yes or no to the vaccine is all you're looking for. So that was pretty much on the money for a half hour. Tried to be efficient.
Oh, not bad. Pretty good.
So yes, if anybody wants to talk about what's happening at their business, or not even their business, but maybe businesses they know of. You know, just sort of have some dialogue about what they're seeing, you know, from other employers out there. You know, now's a great time to have kind of a dialogue on that. Any problems that have come up, you know, even interesting solutions that companies have been, you know, finding to, you know. Yes, go
I
ahead,
actually,
Nancy.
I'll ask the question for the person who kind of got us on track to do this program. Who, it's a woman who's a solopreneur, and she has a home office. She needs an administrative assistant who will be working in her home. She is vaccinated. Is this something that she can include in her advertisement, that, you know, you must be fully vaccinated? So it's out there from the get-go that this is what her requirement is.
Yes, yes. The EEOC has said, you know, vaccine requirement is okay, you know, as part of a condition for employment. And again, even though she's not, if you think about it, that's going to be something that companies with 100 or more are going to have see happen as soon as we get some more guidance from OSHA and a date. But for her as a sole practitioner, as long as she has it as her policy, as long as it's equally applied, you know, again, she can't hire somebody after this person and not require that. So she has to keep all of this, you know, equal and the same. Yes, and consistent. But again, if that is her policy, I certainly recommend writing it down somewhere, having a policy that she hands to the, you know, to the potential new employee. But as long as it's fairly applied to all employees, then she can absolutely, you know, write a policy for that and say we have a vaccine mandate. And again, with the accommodation exceptions, if you have a medical or religious accommodation request, then we have to go through that.
Thank you.
Bill Purcell, Nance, may I? Just a comment. First of all, thank you very much, Leslie and Diana. My recall is when the president announced this, both the U.S. Chamber and the Business Roundtable applauded it and supported it, because in many ways it took the burden off of employers to make that decision. And now you say, of course, smaller employees will have the protection of the EOC to require vaccination. So, you know, notwithstanding the 24 AGs, you know, across the country that have opposed this, is it safe to say that you know, business leadership nationally is behind this effort? And you mentioned, you know, you gave examples of companies that have really gone on the offense: Capital One, Microsoft, Walt Disney, Facebook, etc.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, taking my cue from, for example, Governor Lamont yesterday, you know, he just didn't, you know, again, he was getting peppered with all sorts of exception questions and, you know, what if questions. And he was just very blunt and brief about it. He's like, unless you need an accommodation, everybody should be vaccinated. That's the end of it. I'm not going to answer, you know, specifics, you know, oh, this group or that group or whatever. He's just mandating the whole thing. Like, he doesn't want to hear about it unless you have an accommodation request. That's it. So again, I feel like businesses will end up following that directive. I mean, our governments are first, state workers, you know, but it's really setting the trend, I think, for what's going to come down the pike, which is private businesses. You know, this is just unprecedented in the fact that private business is being asked really for the first time to help. Before, private business could stay out of it, right? And now suddenly the government is saying, oh, private business, we're going to ask you to step up as well. So it's not just state workers, it's not just federal employees. We want the private employee to also be vaccinated. And again, unless you have some compelling accommodation need, we expect everybody to be vaccinated so they can come to work. And that's really the trend that I see and the trend that I hear about. So, you know, again, remote workers, that's going to be a real wild card. I can't wait to hear more about that because again, we saw how for federal employees, they're not making an exception for remote workers. So it will be very interesting to see what happens with more guidance from OSHA on remote workers.
If I
I
could
think,
just.
I think the biggest tipping point to this is for those companies that have a large group or larger groups of employees that do not want to get vaccinated. I think it's very scary for the owner of that company because they're so concerned about losing those people. And that's really the worry, is how will, if we go along with this mandate, even if the business owner, themselves believe in this mandate, but they have 25, factory workers, let's say, that are just not going to get the vaccination, and they risk then having those people leave, or ultimately at some point potentially forcing them to leave. What will everyone do with this shortage in employment? Because there are so many positions, as we know, that are open now that we can't get filled. So I think that's probably what is keeping business owners up at night more than anything right now, is even if they think it's the right thing to do, some of them are really terrified at what their final outcome and picture could look like.
Right. And again, the laws are forcing the hand a little bit, because if you in fact have a vaccine policy and there's no accommodation required by an employee, they just simply say, I'm not getting it. Sorry, I'm out of here. They most likely won't be eligible for unemployment because they broke company policy. And so that's also been mentioned a lot, because again, it's another way to kind of penalize, if you will, an employee who says, I'm just not doing it. So the government's taken that into consideration too, make no mistake. And so they're really steering everybody into trying to push it through and get everybody vaccinated. And they're not making it easy for people who say, no, I'm not doing it. So it's again, really unprecedented that, this is working so much into the private sector, but here we are.
If I could, Nance, just to follow up on the governor's executive order, there's a piece in this morning's paper, sort of a test case in Wallingford, where teacher refused both vaccination as well as COVID testing and was placed on unpaid administrative leave. So we'll follow that story. But could you expand on, made a comment that both hospitals and long-term care facilities, that there is no option of testing in lieu of vaccination. So that's obviously a public health, for those people on the front lines. Could you expand on that?
Sure. I think that was actually taken from yesterday's news conference as well. And again, in Connecticut, and we also saw in New York, it was very dramatic. The new governor of New York was saying that she would call in the National Guard if the healthcare workers walked off the job, in protest of not getting vaccinated. I actually turned on the news really early this morning because I couldn't wait to try to find out what happened. And I actually did. I was unsuccessful. I still don't know what happened, how many people that this ended up, being an effect. But if anybody knows what is happening with the New York State health workers, I would love to hear it, because it was top story yesterday, because yesterday was the deadline and they had till 11:59 last night to comply. And then again, allegedly the New York governor was on the news saying, I don't know how many thousands of people this could affect, but if that's the case, I'll call in the National Guard if I have to. So again, I'm curious to see exactly what happened and what the numbers, the real numbers turned out to be, because again, it was a big anticipation, just like the Connecticut bus drivers, right? Yesterday, the school bus driver shortage was on the news, and the school bus drivers were allegedly everyone was talking about how many would not comply. I didn't get any feedback this morning as of 7 a.m. as to exactly what number of school bus drivers just left their positions because they wouldn't comply with the vaccine mandate. I don't know the answer, but I'm curious to find out because I don't think it turned out to be as bad as there was speculation for. Sure, there probably were some, but it wasn't hundreds of school bus drivers. So again, yesterday was a really big day in terms of those deadlines for a lot of those state employees.
And Diana, to be clear, those workers are not being given the option to test.
Correct.
Correct. They are get the vaccination or you will be terminated from your job. Correct?
Yes, those particular state workers.
Correct.
I believe it was long-term care health workers. But again, we haven't heard of that necessarily trickling down to the public sector, or excuse me,
Correct.
the private sector yet.
Private sector. Right.
So, we'll have to see what happens.
Stay tuned.
Just looking very quickly at the news feed.
Yes.
There still
yes,
isn't anything. There still isn't anything about New York except for the fact, we had discussed very briefly earlier that the federal court held up the New York City schools mandate
Correct.
yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And Massachusetts, going in a totally different direction, the state troopers walked off the job
Correct.
about the mandate.
Yep. Correct.
Yesterday, but a lot of it unfortunately is about the going into the financial sector and the debt ceiling, and that's the majority of my news feed this morning.
Yes. So that leads me to believe that it wasn't quite the crisis that was possibly expected. Again, the school bus, Connecticut school bus drivers, top story yesterday, nothing today.
Yeah, and I think I read some of the numbers over the weekend. It was only about 200 bus drivers that were refusing overall of all of the bus drivers.
Right. But I feel like 200 is a significant number. And so if there had in fact been 200 walk-offs, I think we would have heard about it this morning because that would have been a lot of stranded kids. So I feel like if it wasn't a top story, maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic as yesterday's news was anticipating. Yeah.
I do have a question. Again, this probably goes back to the figuring out what 100 employees are, but what about franchises? So for example, a Dunkin' Donuts franchise where they're part of the bigger Dunkin' Donuts picture, or the McDonald's or Subway or any of those, but they own an individual franchise where there's not necessarily 100 employees. And on that 100, do you think it's, for example, with the chamber, we have the full-time equivalents. So does it fall under that realm as well?
Yes.
I know this is probably just asking questions that we can't answer yet, but.
And I love that because it's, again, coming from a staffing background where temporary associates, when we had the, Obamacare, we had to lobby for the Lookback Method. And will they use that same, and I had said that earlier, the Lookback Method could be used for all of these types of businesses that fluctuate so much. You don't fall into a neat little package where here's my full-time people. That's not it. So will they write in the language to include full-time equivalents, and will they use the same definition of that? Will we be looking at a Lookback Method and going through that fun again? So and franchises, I've read nothing about that. So that's a excellent point. Excellent point. And let's hope they include that in their rules, or they're going to get a lot of questions.
Yeah. I would imagine, and this is just imagining, I'm not saying this is the right answer, that large franchises such as McDonald's will most likely be viewed as McDonald's, the overarching franchise name, making the decisions, and that will be passed down to the franchisees and franchises. So that's, again, solely just speculation, but I would imagine that's what it would look like.
Just a little more input on that. Back in the PPP loan times, franchises were deemed not to be grouped together with others. So if you had one McDonald's franchise, you had 60 employees, you were considered a small business. You could get the loan. So maybe they'll do the same thing with that.
And
Yeah.
there goes that speculation. See what I mean?
Which
Wow, it's just-
criteria?
it's so amazing to hear how I would not have thought that, but
To-
I can understand why they would have done that way. So that makes sense. Yeah, Good point,
again, two ways to play it, right?
sure.
And which side will they fall under?
Yeah, because they are
idea.
individual sole business owners.
Sole.
So yeah, that's a really good point. It'll be very interesting when we hear that information. Not one word has been uttered about that yet. So I can imagine what they're trying to do. Anyone have any more questions for us?
Well, thank you. We love speaking to local businesses. This is our specialty and our interest, and we're here anytime, just to talk. Let us know what's going on where you are, what challenges you're seeing. Again, the more information we can all share, I think that makes us all feel more confident about going forward in, again, uncharted territory for so many businesses. It's caused a lot of stress and anxiety, and again, we're all waiting and watching, but again, we thank you because again, feedback and information and sharing is so important. So thank you for inviting us and having us today. We've really enjoyed it.
Let me end, Nancy, if I could, with a PSA. I think, as we all know, the booster shots are now available, and our office at the Chamber is located above the Griffin Vaccination Center. It is open, no appointment required, and I will say business has been brisk since last Friday. Certain cohorts, 65 and older, and those pre-existing conditions. So we are seeing that happen each and every day. I want to thank both of you. First of all, congratulations on the 25+ year association and launching your enterprise in the midst of this pandemic. To you, Leslie. So congratulations. Known each other a lot of years, and we will most definitely share today's recording with our members in our next newsletter. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights.